Hey, so I'm going to get right into it because I had this epiphany this week. I was asked to write a post about common scenarios that doctors face. And I realized that we as a whole tend to respond very similarly because it's part of the culture. I realized that we have been raised. Yes, I would say raised because I think medicine has really consumed most of our formative years to constantly prove ourselves. That's how we're raised, and to prove others wrong. So when someone challenges us, we set out to prove that we do, in fact, deserve this spot, this job, this promotion, this title. Our motto should be yes, we can. You think I'm lazy? I don't deserve to be here. Well, let me show you how I can work even harder, how I can prove that I deserve this spot. You think doctors don't prioritize patient care? Well, let me stay late and ensure that this patient gets properly admitted, transferred, their family's questions are all answered, and on and on. As someone who's always new in work environments, thanks to my job as a outpatient locums pediatrician, I'm exposed to a lot of physicians. I have this conversation a lot. So there are things that I feel are particularly true about doctors. And also why I feel connected to early career physicians, because we're always the new guy somewhere, right? And that has a certain identity. So in a new role, as you're learning the culture and trying to negotiate for what you want and also try to fit in, get along, show that you belong. Ooh, that rhymed. There's a certain identity that you take on. I should be clear, this is not limited to the beginning of your career only. This can continue in perpetuity if we don't see this for what it is. It's weaponized altruism. This is what we're facing. Altruism is something that we relate to. We all consider ourselves to be altruistic. And so when it's weaponized in this way, it can be so harmful to us. How many times has someone asked you to do more? You agreed to a job, there are set hours, there's set requirements, but almost as soon as you get in the door, they're asking you to do a little bit more. They want you to agree to some unfavorable work condition because of altruism. The patients will suffer if you don't. I think of every locums recruiter who wants to sell you on a terrible location with crummy pay. It's all because of the community. They need you. And how do I know that we as physicians have internalized this belief? Whenever a doctor considers leaving a job that has used and abused them, right? The job itself has been horrible to them. One of their arguments for staying a lot longer in a place that's toxic is, oh, yes, the job is horrible, but what about my patients? And that feels honorable to say that you're going to stick around for the betterment of the community. Look at me, I'm sacrificing for the greater good. That feels good inside. How many times has patient satisfaction come up in your work review? How often is criticism couched in the language of altruism? So I want to spend a little time highlighting this and being really clear about what I mean by this. Whenever you do something that someone doesn't like, it comes back to you in some feedback, some evaluation under the guise of you haven't been a team player, or you haven't shown that you are willing to go above and beyond. These are the most common arguments I see launched against us as physicians when someone is asking us to do unpaid labor, essentially. Employers will literally use words that create discomfort within us, that create discordance between how we like to identify ourselves and what they want. So if they tie their expectations to our personal values, then we are much more likely to comply. So if I don't do what you're asking me to do, then I am not the person I believe myself to be. That kind of communication, the goal is to create a strong emotional discomfort that spurs me into doing the things that they want me to do. And so let me give you some examples. I honestly don't think I've thought about this with such clarity before. I knew when I was agreeing to things that something was off. And it makes me think a little bit of residency when I would consistently go over duty hours. Many of the other residents would just report the scheduled hours because at the end of the month, it would fall on us to explain why we were in violation of duty hours. But me, I was like in my petty label, like, I'm going to report every single hour that I worked. Someone needs to know that I worked these hours. It was my small act of rebellion, but this meant like I said, at the end of the month, filling out a form stating why I violated duty hours. And I remember having multiple email back and forth with our associate PD at the time to put that the reason was patient care, because on the form there's a drop down and it includes a couple different choices as to why you have exceeded the duty hours. And she told me that this is what I needed to put. So regardless as to how I felt about my duties, because mostly it was paperwork, admin stuff, I needed to say that it was for patient care because that was a justifiable reason, even at a overarching level. So like ACGME, who governs residency programs and sets the rules, for them, that is an acceptable reason for why I could violate my duty hours. I could do everything in the name of patient care. And so when I violated, I was told that that was the reason I needed to put. Isn't that wild? Me as a resident being told that I need to put patient care as the excuse for why they constantly had me violating. Because if I didn't indicate that, then I was putting the entire program in jeopardy at violating ACGME guidelines, which could lead to them losing their accreditation. So single-handedly, my lowly paid self was threatening my own future, because if my program lost accreditation, how could I graduate from an unaccredited program? Right? It affects my future. So to them, they're telling me that, yes, you will continue to violate duty hours and you better say it's patient care. Otherwise, your future is in jeopardy. Can we talk about how twisted that reporting system is and how inaccurately it is capturing the workload of residents across the country? Okay. So rather than my program taking accountability and saying, oh, we're messing up, the repercussions of this is losing the program, they place the entire onus on me to lie. And then they further cement the notion that I should accept this, and so does ACGME. I should accept that patient care is a valid reason for violating these contractual hours. It creates this narrative that we are selfish if we aren't putting the needs of patients as our top priority, whether or not that's true. Because honestly, I was there writing notes, or I was there rounding or putting in orders, things that could easily be done by someone else, especially when I'm at the end of like a 28-hour call stint. There's no way it's safer for me to violate my work hours and continue while at peak exhaustion than it is to sign out my duties to the next shift. Of course, I consider myself someone who prioritizes patient care. Of course, that was the whole point of getting into medicine. They know that. They know our motivation is to serve the people. So it becomes almost like a propaganda that I have to write that as my reason while ignoring my desperate need to rest or to eat or to take care of myself in some other form after being awake for too many hours, because it's all in the sake of my patients. This does not stop after residency. And I think we talk to our attendings a lot and we complain a lot when in training about the culture of things. And they're like, oh, well, at least ACGME is there to protect you. When you become an attending, that's because y'all don't stand up for yourselves as attending. That's not on the residents, but sidebar. You see this constantly continue to play into the culture of medicine in so many different ways. I get recruiters who call me with a desperate need to fill a spot because the patients in that community are great and they need me. I get employers or supervisors who are trying to saddle me with more work, and the motivation that they use to get me to do it is that someone is going to suffer. This is the same technique used consistently across all medical environments to get me to add more to my plate, asking me to do more in the name of service. I've been told time and time again, or been expected to stay late, that I need to go above and beyond to work at home. Basically, I've been told to do whatever needs to be done in that job, regardless as to how much of my own personal time, uncompensated time, that it requires, and I need to do so at the same pay rate. So we have this reaction to being called a team player, and it's exploited in the name of spurring us to do more. They are trying to inspire us to be a certain type of employee, trying to create dedicated employees, but that's the wrong way to go about it. And here's why. The more they add to my plate, the more they do not acknowledge me for the team player I truly am, the more they criticize my performance in the sake of getting me to do more, the more I want to check out. I have two opposing reactions that somehow still yield the same result. The first is a loss of motivation because I'm not being acknowledged for my work. I'm being criticized for not being the very thing that I am. So telling me I'm not a team player, even though I am. Telling me that I'm not willing to go above and beyond, even though I am. And then the other reaction, which is the one that they're aiming for, is that I have a strong desire to prove that I am not what you think I am. But at the end of both of those, I'm exhausted. So I'm either exhausted from trying to prove myself, or I'm exhausted from constantly being criticized. And the result is the same. My value continues to be unacknowledged, and I still end up wanting to walk away or run away from that work environment. Here are two examples of the going above and beyond in the same work environment that allowed me to see this argument. I was asked to cover calls. There was no indication of how much call was going to be required, what the hours were, what I would need to do during the call. Do I need to write notes? How do I document? Am I responsible for prescriptions, etc.? There were no specifications. It was just that, oh, you're going to be required to cover some call. Okay. So when the call came around, I was asked on the day of to cover a Thursday through Sunday call because the doctor whose practice it is was going out of town. Okay. In the moment, I was thinking, well, I'm new at this job. We're still kind of hashing things out. We're definitely going to have to figure out what's going on with this call scenario, but she's going out of town. So I'll cover the call. I'll make myself available to answer incoming inquiries from the triage nurses. And then when she returns, I'm going to figure out exactly how to document that I'm covering call, what's the compensation, etc. But when it came time to do my timesheet, I asked, how do I report call on the timesheet? And they tried to tell me it was included. I only worked 18 hours in the week. That's my contract, is to do part-time work. And you're telling me I need to be on call Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's 4 days. So We're talking what? 72 hours. You want me to do 72 hours of call? That's 3 times what my work schedule is, what my contract is for pay. Like that doesn't even balance, doesn't even make any sense. But I was told that, oh, I'm treating this like I'm a temporary employee, that I am well compensated. It should be included in my pay. So trying to shame and guilt me for asking to be compensated for working 3 times more or having 3 times as much availability than we agreed to on the initial schedule. Very interesting. Of course, I feel uncomfortable because, oh my gosh, I never want to be seen as difficult. Now I have to argue this point that I felt taken off guard by because I'd never been in a job where the call rate hadn't been set in advance and hadn't just been the status quo. I don't work salary. I've never been a salaried employee after residency and fellowship because I understand that when people offer you a salary, they continue to expand duties as assigned, regardless as to how much you've initially agreed to. Okay, so here's the other example in the same job environment of why it's true that I am a team player, even though I don't want to do call. I had a kid that was in crisis, had some suicide ideation, and the family was trying to figure out what the best next steps are, what to do, etc. So after a full day of patients, no breaks in between, I even charted through lunch because I'm not taking charting home. So I chose, okay, if that's the only time I have to chart, I'm going to chart. Charted through lunch. The end of the day, I'm supposed to be done by 4:00. My last appointment was at 3:45. Okay. Which obviously everything's always running behind in a clinic. So I didn't finish till closer to 5:00. I still spent 30 minutes on the phone with the parents of this child because this child is in crisis. That's a big deal. And I understand the significance of it, the serious nature of it. I would never want anything to happen to this child. Of course, I'm going to make the choice to do what I need to do to support this family. That meant speaking to the parents, talking through how they were feeling, not just best next steps, right? It wasn't just a checklist of you need to make sure you do this, you need to secure your house to make sure there's no threat, you need to ask her this. I also really sat with the parents and talked about how they felt and what it meant for this kid to return to school, what they were afraid of, really just going through the emotions of it. And that is not something that someone has to tell me or ask me to do. That is my job. And more so than my job, I feel like it is my privilege to be a guidance in a moment like that, in a moment of extreme distress for a family. For me, it is my honor to be able to have such a deeply personal conversation with a family I've never actually met, because that's what the moment calls for. And I know that in residency, I was the same way. I know that in fellowship, I was the same way. As an attending, I'm the same way. When it comes to actual patient care and actually providing support to a family, to a child, there's no doubt in my mind that that is the job. That is the job. That is what I want to do. I want to be there for these families. I want to provide that level of support because that is what's impactful. That is what makes or breaks this child's experience, the recovery period, the healing for the family. That's not something that I need to be told to do, but that is what makes me know for sure that I do go above and beyond and that I am a team player, because I could easily give this family the next steps of here's the psychologist number, here's the crisis hotline, you have to be seen in the ER, this is what you need to do, bum, 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 and get off the phone. But that's not my style. So I pride myself in providing really high quality patient care in that way. And so you cannot come to me, because I'm really secure about that. So you cannot come to me and say that I am not a team player because I won't sign up for unpaid call when I have moments like that with a patient and their family that bring me pride and make me to understand what it does mean to go the extra mile for a family. So having those two scenarios in the same job is so funny to me because they, on more than one occasion, when it came to things like asking for vacation time, which is unpaid leave, and asking not to be on call for an entire weekend or entire week is what they really wanted, being on call every single night and saying that because I don't agree to those stipulations that I'm not a team player, when no one acknowledges also the times when I am a team player. And I don't need them to acknowledge that moment with that patient. But for me, because I've created my own internal metrics regarding what it means to be a team player, then I can do that, right? Like I can distinguish between what is true and what is some BS. Okay. How does this relate to negotiation? If you cannot recognize the language someone is using with you to sway you, if you do not know what your beliefs are around your identity, like the fact that I believe myself to be a team player, as soon as I get accused of that, my negotiation leverage goes out of the window. If I cannot recognize assaults on that belief and see when something is causing me discomfort and take that moment to stop and realize, oh, this is why it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because I see myself as a team player. And so anything that challenges that makes me feel like I need to prove myself. If I don't acknowledge that, I really do lose all of my leverage. You're going to have a hard time negotiating if those are not the steps that you can walk yourself through in your brain. They will have you agreeing to stuff that you don't even know what you're agreeing to just because you want to rectify your reputation. The long-term effect of this behavior, of them assaulting your inner values and you agreeing to things in order to preserve that value within yourself, preserve that identity, is what we're seeing in the culture of medicine now. It's the high rates of doctors feeling burnout and the high rates of people transitioning out of medicine and trying to do non-clinical responsibilities. So when I say that negotiation protects the medical career, this is what I mean. When we learn to negotiate, we become aware of all of these subliminal tactics, these communication tools that people are using against us in order to create these work environments that are not sustainable. And we learn how to manage them, how to navigate around them, how to respond in a way that preserves us. That's what I love about teaching doctors to negotiate. So, to recap, when someone is asking you to do anything in the name of altruism, your hackles should rise. It should raise suspicion. I also want you to focus on whether what they're saying gives you the kind of discomfort that would be immediately relieved by complying, because that's the goal of that kind of communication. You feel a discomfort, and the easiest thing to do would be to agree, because then you could reset yourself back to being the person you know yourself to be. When you sense that dis-ease, I need you to acknowledge it. I always say to myself, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable. What is happening? Why am I uncomfortable? What is being asked of me? What part of my identity is being threatened here? Is it true? Then I let them know I'm going to get back to them on it, because this is obviously something that I need to think about. And when you ask them for time to think, you allow yourself space to buffer. You allow yourself to really think about what you're agreeing to in terms of how it affects your overall life, how it affects your schedule. Is it too big of an ask? If you can do this beginning step, then you are really on your way to becoming a great negotiator, a great self-advocate. And all of those things have to be in place to create these sustainable careers. There are, of course, a few more steps after that, right? Once you step away from them, you want to know how to respond, how to say no if that's the answer, how to have these kinds of conversations while feeling uncomfortable. You want to be able to recognize these kinds of scenarios as they're happening, because otherwise it surely does put you on the path to burnout. And when you're ready to confidently decline something or communicate that you do not agree, that's where I got you. I want you to come and join me and the other docs in the Any Day Negotiator coaching program, because I walk you through all of this. It's actually simpler than it sounds. It's just, setting off your alarms bells. And then once your alarm bells are set off, all you got to know is how to respond, how to take care of yourself in that moment, and then how to respond to them so that it doesn't create further discomfort, so that it doesn't create an environment that you are so sorry that you agreed to. That's it for this week. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this. Did this ring true for you, that people saying certain things has triggered you into agreeing to something or backed you into a corner regarding your work life? Does it create scenarios where you move further and further away from your work-life balance goals? If so, reach out. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you guys. I'm happy to point this out and give you the exact steps you need to confidently move away from this kind of communication. All right, have a great week. Bye.